The snow came early that winter, blanketing the small frontier town of Silver Creek in a white silence that swallowed sound and softened every hard edge. Wooden rooftops sagged beneath the weight of frost. Chimneys breathed thin trails of smoke into the pale air, and the only movement on the main street was the wind carrying flakes like whispers. Out beyond the town, nestled near the frozen creek, stood a small cabin where Eli Mercer, a weathered cowboy with a quiet soul, tended to his fire in his solitude. He'd been a ranch hand, a drifter, a man of few words and fewer friends, until the cold pushed him off the trail and into a season of waiting. But that evening, as the wind howled low like a lonely spirit, a soft knock on his cabin door changed everything he thought he knew about the cold and about himself. When Eli opened the door, the storm's breath rushed in, carrying with it a figure wrapped in a torn wool coat. Beneath the frost and fear was Clara Bennett, the daughter of the town's late doctor, her cheeks flushed red with cold and eyes wide with exhaustion. Her horse had gone lame miles back, and she'd wandered through the snow hoping for shelter. Eli pulled her inside without a word, closing the storm behind her. She trembled by the fire as he poured her a cup of coffee, his rough hands strangely gentle as he draped a blanket over her shoulders. Outside, the world was white and cruel, but inside the cabin, the fire flickered warm against two souls who had never meant to meet. She looked up at him then, a faint smile breaking through her trembling lips, and said softly, "You saved me, mister." Eli just shook his head. "No, ma'am," he said, "just gave you a place to thaw." The hours stretched into a long night. Clara spoke little, but her eyes lingered on the man who had offered her shelter. Eli wasn't much for conversation. He'd learned long ago that silence was safer than words. But he found himself asking where she was headed. Clara told him she'd been trying to reach an old friend's homestead before the storm hit, but the trail had vanished beneath the snow. Her voice carried both strength and sorrow, the kind that only comes from losing more than one person to the wilderness. Eli listened, the firelight dancing in his eyes, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding that both had wandered too long in different kinds of cold. By midnight, the wind's rage softened to a whisper, and they sat close to the fire, two strangers sharing warmth that felt almost like destiny. Eli noticed her eyes shining not from the firelight, but from the reflection of something new, something he hadn't seen in years: trust. The next morning dawned gray and still, the storm's fury buried beneath a world of white. Clara insisted she should leave, but the snow lay thick and treacherous. Eli, his hat pulled low, told her plainly she wouldn't make it far, not with the roads frozen and wolves hunting near the ridge. "You'll stay," he said firmly, though his tone carried more concern than command. She wanted to argue, but her strength faltered, so she stayed. The days that followed found them settling into a rhythm. He chopped wood and hunted for game. She cooked, mended his shirts, and sometimes hummed tunes from her childhood. Each night they'd talk by the fire, their words unraveling the loneliness that had bound them both for too long. She told him stories of her father's clinic, of the spring festivals in Silver Creek. He told her about the cattle drives, the deserts, the endless horizons. Slowly, beneath the quiet snowfall, something tender began to grow. By the end of the first week, the storm had sealed them in, and the cabin had become more than a refuge. It was their world. Outside, the pine trees bowed beneath the snow, and the frozen creek shimmered like glass. Inside, warmth filled the air, not just from the fire, but from their laughter. Clara began to tease Eli for his gruffness, and to her surprise, he began teasing back. She caught him once, carving something out of wood when she asked. He only smiled and hid it behind his back. That night, he gave it to her, a small carving of a sparrow perched on a branch. "They say sparrows bring good luck," he muttered, a little embarrassed. Clara held it close, her heart thudding louder than the crackling logs. She whispered, "Maybe they bring love, too." Eli looked at her for a long time, saying nothing, but in his eyes, Something had already said it. One night, as snowflakes drifted past the window like silver ghosts, Clara found herself awake while Eli slept near the fire. She studied the lines of his face, the scars, the strength, the quiet. Life had been cruel to both of them, yet here, in this frozen corner of the world, they'd found something gentle. She pulled a blanket over him, her fingers brushing his hair, and for the first time in years, she whispered a prayer not for survival, but for the chance that this feeling might last beyond the thaw. When Eli stirred awake, he caught her hand in his without opening his eyes. "You keep doing that," he said softly, "and I might start thinking you care." Her cheeks flushed crimson, but she didn't pull away. The fire crackled between them, a small, burning secret shared in the deep heart of winter. As weeks passed, the storm finally began to fade. The sun returned, pale but promising, melting the snow in glittering rivulets down the roof. Yet with the changing weather came the weight of reality. Clara's path lay back in Silver Creek alleys, as always, led nowhere in particular. Over breakfast, she tried to speak of leaving, but her voice trembled. "I can't stay forever," she said. Ellie's jaw tightened, his coffee cup motionless in his hand. "I know," he replied, but in truth, he didn't. He didn't know how to watch her walk away from the warmth they'd built, nor how to face the silence that would follow. That night, neither of them spoke much. The snow melted outside, but inside the cabin, winter had found another way to linger in their hearts, afraid of what morning might bring. The morning she left, the world seemed too bright. Her horse was saddled, the trails clearer than they'd been in weeks. Eli helped her mount, his hand steady though his heart wasn't. She looked down at him, her breath hanging in the air like a ghost. "You could come with me," she whispered. He shook his head slowly. "Town's not for me, Clara. Never was." She tried to smile, but tears rimmed her lashes. "Then I'll come back," she said. "You better," he replied, tipping his hat low to hide what his eyes betrayed. As she rode off, the snow crunched beneath her horse's hooves, each step a sound that tore deeper into his chest. Eli stood there until she vanished into the trees. The world suddenly took quiet. The fire in his cabin took hold. Spring came late that year. Eli returned to his ranch work, the days blending into one another. Yet, every evening, as the sun sank red behind the mountains, he'd carve another little sparrow out of wood, one for each day she was gone. The cabin walls slowly filled with them, a flock of wooden promises. Sometimes he'd sit by the window and imagine, her laugh echoing against the pine trees, her hands stirring a pot by the fire, her eyes meeting his. The world kept moving, but part of him stayed frozen in that winter waiting. The men in town spoke of him like a ghost. Some said he'd lost his mind, but Eli knew better. He hadn't lost it. He'd given it to someone worth losing it for. Then one twilight, as snow began to fall again, soft, quiet, familiar, he heard a sound outside, hoofbeats, slow and sure. When he opened the cabin door, there she was, wrapped in that same old coat, her cheeks pink from the cold. "Told you I'd come back," Clara said with a smile that melted every frozen thing inside him. Eli stepped forward, his voice rough. "Took you long enough," she laughed through her tears. And when he pulled her close, the snow fell harder round them, a white curtain sealing them off from the rest of the world. Inside the cabin, the fire roared again, and outside, the winter wind carried a single truth across the plains: love, even in the coldest places, never really dies.